Level 5 or Richard Hyde, Scum Man. So be cautious.
What's up, Piper Drivers, and welcome to the Cantina Chat. Thank you for joining us for this very special episode. A little earlier in the week is because we have a film legend in the house with us, and the man who is directly responsible with the look and feel of the Star Wars universe. We got Roger Christian in the house with us. So this is probably one of the most momentous occasions of the Hyperdrive. So thank you, Roger, for coming onto the show. Really appreciate that.
Not at all. Hello to everybody.
All right.
Hold on. Before we go any further, please move Roger up ahead of me.
Yeah. He has to be higher.
Oh,
you want to go here?
Yeah.
There you go. That's better.
We can do that. We got the whole crew with us tonight. So we got Evan in the house again. What's going on, Evan?
What's up, guys? Glad to be here.
Got Frankie as always. What's going on?
Yes, man. This great. I could not miss this for nothing.
We got Ralph wearing the Tauntaun hat.
Until I'm 90 years old. Until I'm 90, I was told.
And Flexi DJing for us. What's going on, dude?
What's up? Can't wait for this one.
Yeah.
So, like I said, special guest tonight. So this is going to be all about Roger Christian tonight. Let's say what's up to everybody in the chat, and then we can get this show going. So here we go. Let's say what's up. We got Pat's fan who joined us 6 hours ahead of time. That's how excited he was to come on tonight's show.
Heck yeah.
What's up, Pat?
Hey.
We got Alejandro. Hey everyone, switch the days on me.
Surprise.
All right.
You're on your toes.
We got Collecting with Cool stopping by to say hello.
What's up, Brett?
What's up, Brett?
All right. We got Darth Shizzle in the house. What's going on?
Nice.
He's dealing with storms. That's what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hope everybody's doing well with all these storms. I know it's crazy out there right now. Garwing Chung, what's going on, dude?
Hello.
Garwing.
All right. And we got Xena. Hello, Chantel.
She is our resident lightsaber princess.
Yes.
Right.
She has
a lot of lightsabers.
more lightsabers.
How many?
115,
right?
wasn't it?
Something like that. Well over 100.
Yeah, it's well over 100.
She puts
Put it
my
up.
in the
Put it
shade.
in
what
the
you
chat,
started?
Xena.
Did you see what you started, Roger? It's all because of you.
I know. It's funny that I was at Comic-Con here last year, and there was like, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people and everything. We were standing there and somebody said, look, this is all because of Star Wars, everything. And it kind of put it in perspective.
Yeah.
For sure. Len, how's it going?
What's up, man?
And this is where I start jumping around. OBP's in the house. How's it going, Obi?
What's up, Pete?
What's up, OBP?
And so I got to go through this, Rogers, because I'm about to be going to San Diego Comic-Con. I'm trying to avoid buying lunch because that's what happens if I miss somebody.
Oh, right. Really?
They call him out.
They call me out if I don't call them. Got Rolando joining us.
What's up, Rolando?
Got Flex pulling double duty. We got Darth Marmar in the house.
Marmar.
Graham Oliver.
Nice.
Nathan's Gaming, the winner of last week's contest.
That's
Yes.
right. He did win.
Oh, yeah.
We got Miles.
Miles.
What's up,
I don't know if
man?
you guys saw Miles' stand that he built for the C-3PO head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is awesome.
Yeah,
So
it is.
he built one for me.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, I should be getting that. I just paid it for it today, so I should be getting that hopefully when I get back from Texas when we're all going to meet at Rebel Scum Con. So it's gonna be fun.
And Kyle and Miles, definitely everybody shares that. Thank you for everything you have done for this amazing franchise, Roger.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I'll be there at Rebel Scum.
Yeah, I know. Can't wait to meet you in person.
These guys are going to hound you. Watch out.
All right, we got Rob Zombie in the house.
Or at the end of the stream, he'll have a restraining order, one of the two.
Oh.
What's up, Rob?
Scott in the house.
Scotty.
Scotty.
Right, Scotty.
Why do you start early?
Yeah.
It's George. He does that. He makes us.
I know. It's on me. Caleb is in the house. What's going on?
Nice.
What's up, Caleb? What up?
Oh, he has the Roger
Oh, yeah, the
Christian
Roger
saber from
Christian
Theory Saber.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Nice.
Oh, yes.
Very cool. Michelle
Oh,
Nooney.
very cool. Which number did you get?
Caleb, which number did you get? Put it in the chat.
Yeah, Caleb. Hey, Michelle.
You already- Rob wants me to pay for lunch from the last time I didn't call everybody out.
Oh, come on. Come on.
I'm not making that mistake again. And I think we're all caught up. Jeffs, if you're out there in the world, I'm saying what's up to you anyway.
Anybody
So-
named Jeff, your name has been
Call
called.
Jeff. I'm calling you all out. All right, man. OBP saying mega size welcome for Mr. Christian, creator of the most awesome weapon ever.
Yes.
Man, looking at all the props that you made, I love the lightsabers the most. Obviously, those are the things that really stick with me. But then Han Solo's blaster is there too, so it's like I like that a lot as well. It's insane. And I just love everything that you've done for the franchise. The question that I would start off with is, like, we always start off this with anybody that comes onto the show, is usually, what made you a fan of Star Wars. But for you, being created it, when did you realize that this was such a phenomenon the way it became?
I tell you when exactly, because it's fairly common knowledge now that to make it was extremely difficult, and there was no faith in Star Wars, none of the studios except for Alan Ladd. And then when we got to London and found this minuscule budget that was nowhere near enough to make what we had to make, and most of the British crew had no inkling or kind of absolutely no kind of connection to what George had got. Science fiction was not at all kind of regarded as content in those days. I happen to love science fiction because I read a lot. And so the crew worked away at it, but they thought it honestly was a pile of crap, most of them. And most of them gave George a horrible time throughout the whole shooting. And, we started with George in August when there was no money, and just 5 of us with John Barry, who was a designer, massive help to George. We just spent 4 months, the 5 of us, trying to work out how on earth to make this thing for no money. And so it was pretty rough, the whole making of it. I just stuck by George's side, and so did John Barry. And the reason I say this is because the moment I always knew, as soon as I read in the script this laser sword that Obi-Wan Kenobi brought out of an old trunk, I thought, oh, here it is. If this film's going to work, this will be the icon, because as a kid, I grew up with King Arthur. And of course, Excalibur, I was down in the woods with a stick, and I was King Arthur fighting dragons. So with all of this, and it ended, and it you have to imagine that there were stormtroopers clanking about with, what we'd put on them that was making noises and falling apart. C-3PO was held together with gold tape. There were creatures that no one ever understood what they were except for us. And there was Darth Vader talking like that because I come from Somerset. That was how it was done on the stage. And, muffled language from C-3PO and R2-D2, who were squabbling because Anthony could never understand a word that he was trying to say through this whole tin can. So by the end of it, I knew we had something. The sets were amazing. The actors were fantastic. You know, we became friends with the actors. We relished our time with them all. And the moment I knew was there was a crew screening in the Dominion Theatre in Tottenham Court Road. And we all assembled there, and there's all these naysayers, everybody sitting there. And I promise that moment that ship went overhead, I felt the energy in this room change.
Wow.
Yeah.
And coming out of there were all these people going, wow, didn't we do a great job? Wow, we are. Well, you know, the people who put everybody down the whole way through. And we just came out smiling,
Yeah.
thinking, you know what? We've done it. This is going to change the world.
It surely did.
It did. So much.
Yeah, there's, you know, that for me, it was like, I have a few references. You know, there was Robbie the Robot, and there was Flash Gordon, and none of the Barbarella, none of these films. They were fun, but I couldn't believe a word of any of them. And the look, especially, you know, the plastic guns and sets that seemed to be that every director was going, wow, look at this set. I've got to show all of this fantasy stuff. And I knew I didn't believe a word of it. And George's, when I first met him in Mexico, the first thing he said was, I'm trying to make a spaghetti Western in space. He didn't have to say any more. My hero was Kurosawa. And Sergio Leone's movies, every single one he made, were based on a Kurosawa movie, and, you know, made for under $1 million in Spain. And they were so real, his movies. They were more real Westerns to me than the big Hollywood ones. So I just knew we were on the same track, and watching it, loving and enjoying it, because when you see it all put together with the special effects and everything was in there, I was just basking in the joy of watching something so original and kind of life-changing, really. But I knew that we'd pulled it off because it all looked real, it all looked believable. And, you know, George's mantra always to me was, I'm not making a science fiction film, I'm making a documentary. And I think that was half of the combat of trying to get an audience to accept science fiction, that for the first time this was real. You know, Tatooine looked like a planet that was lived in and old and used, and things went wrong, you know. And this dented kind of used universe. And I just loved all the weapons, because when we started, basically I couldn't afford to do any. There was no time by the time they triggered the movie in January, and we were shooting in March, so I had no time to make anything or design anything. I relied on found objects, and the guns, I realized if I rented them and stuck bits on them, I could take them back afterwards and they would only be a rental charge. So the joy of that, like the Sterling, and you know, my favorite is too his Hands Blaster as well. I love that weapon. They could fire on set, and we had single blanks on them, and wow. they were, you've got a puff of smoke and a light at the end. And the actors, they were heavy. The actors weren't kind of dealing with lightweight plastic guns that you never quite believed they were real. These things were real. They had to handle them like weapons. So I think all of that kind of, it just came bleeding across in the film for me, that here was a world that you could accept an audience.
Yep. Nice. Very nice. Yeah, and just like what OBP saying here, as in response, he's, you know, as a kid, it blew my mind.
Yeah, I think it did everybody. I mean, you know, and also, you know, I'm a huge supporter of George, and that's why I do everything I can now, because I think, to me, he gave the world something to believe in, especially America. And that whole idea of wonderful Saturday morning cinema ride that you could just enjoy and have fun with, and underneath it is very serious mythology that the classic hero's journey, it's the great saga of Luke Skywalker and a ragtag group of kind of rebels who take on a whole empire, and you're rooting for them all the way. A wonderful piece of casting by George, and I think this bled through to an audience, and whether anyone understood it or not, it was connecting deep inside that this is the story of everybody on the planet. That's how mythology works. That's how legends work. They're metaphors for all of us. Luke Skywalker's hero's journey, it's everybody's journey on the planet. We all go through it. It's whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter, as long as you're following your true kind of path in life. And that's, I think, all of that connected to an audience, whether they understood it or not. And that's, George he's always said he's a Buddhist Methodist, but now from all of the prequels and sequels that the Buddhist technology of the Jedis is much more apparent. See, and Buddhists don't get up and preach. They don't lecture to you. They tell stories. That's how you get it. And that's what George's idea was, mentored by the wonderful Joseph Campbell. Tell stories and people will get it. They'll connect to it. And George has created, a myth for the cinema age, which I love and I support it. And I watch now we're fourth generation, and it's getting bigger. This thing's not going away, which is why I was kind of forced to write the book, because I'm the only one who knows how we did it. There isn't anyone else. John Barry sadly died very young, and so it's down to me, really. George didn't know what we were doing. I would just hand him a blaster. I'd hand him a lightsaber. I'd hand him Luke's binoculars, and he would just smile and get it into the film. And the same with the sets, everything. So it was my duty, really, to take a year off and write this book. And I've just finished a documentary which is called A Galaxy Built on Hope, which is a play on all the words. And there's a 2-hour 20 fan version, which I'll get out. I got a few copies that I can have at Rebel Scum and a few events like that. Sweet. And eventually we'll get it out, probably broken up into a streamer. But this film is not going away. It's getting bigger and bigger. It's going to be studied in universities, in colleges. I mean, forever. Sure. And I think it has to be told how a little tiny movie that was made against all odds and using broken down airplanes and scrap pieces created a change in cinema, really. So I think I had to write it all down, and I love it. I mean, I fortunately always kept healthy and I have a very good memory, so all of it was The others didn't. The other two lieutenants who were with us, Les Dilly, he's now passed away, but he'd got dementia. They and Norman Reynolds, who took over eventually, but they were just on there to get things made. Norman especially for getting the sets up and everything, but I was the one who had to create this look for every single prop. And in those days, the set decorator there was only me, John Barry, Les Dilly, and Norman Reynolds. That was the entire art department, and everything that came under then a set decorator was everything from weapons, sets, robots, vehicles, locations. I mean, every single thing.
So, in other words, everything that we see has been brought to you in part by you.
Yeah.
The entire like Lion King, everything the light touches has been brought to you by you.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. We're all fans, and I'm like, okay, did he just build the lightsaber? Did he just no, the blasters? No, the robots? No,
Yes.
the set? No, the ship? No, the Death Star? No, the planet? Oh my gosh, creatures, everything.
Yeah,
Everything came from there.
it's funny. I met Christopher Nolan here when Dunkirk played here in the big IMAX, and afterwards I got to meet him, and he said, "My God, I need to ask you a question." He said, "How did you did it all as a set decorator?" And I said, "Yeah, I had to." He said, "Nowadays it's all broken up. One guy does these weapons, another guy does other weapons." He said, "Everything is all compartmentalized. I don't know how you did it." And I said, "Well, I did it without a lot of sleep, and
Did you come in budget?
and there's a British saying called "grin and bear it," and you just get on with it. You know, day to day, you just knock things off and get it done. And I was such a fan of George; we became very good friends, and I was such a fan of the script and everything that John Barry and I put our souls into getting this made for him.
Mr. Christian, can you recall your first impression after reading the Star Wars script for the first time?
Yes. I love the story and sheer panic because we'd arrived in London and taken the job on, and we got the script and read it. And what I do always with scripts, I have to break it down, every set, every prop, every weapon, everything. I break down everything that's required, and I have to make lists of what I think should be there as well that wasn't there. And I just looked at it and said, I can't do this. So I remember telling John Barry, I can't do this. But I said, I love this script, and this is so good that I'm going to find a way to do it. And that was at that point, two things happened. One is, there were, as I said, there were only the four of us. And John Barry realized that we could make C-3PO because Metropolis, the golden robot, Maria, she could move 3 steps. But with an actor inside, we knew 40 years later, if we got the right actor, we could make C-3PO work. But R2-D2, we measured him as 4 foot from Ralph McQuarrie's painting of the two of them. There was no way that there was no CGI. There's none of this stuff. The remote control that worked then was really primitive, and the set the special effects head, John Steers, who's very clever, but he was always full of praise. Oh, this is going to be the best. Oh, it's going to be great, and things never worked. So that was the first thing we did. Had George hire, and we found Kenny Baker, and he was very strong, very funny, and he was 3'8". And you've seen in the book, we built. So I then got, because we didn't have any money, and Robert Watts was there, and I said, "Can we have anything to get some wood and to make some bits?" And he said, "No, I haven't got anything, Roger." So I got Bill Harmon, who made all the props for Monty Python, and I think I think you've all seen Holy Grail. They couldn't even afford horses. Yeah, they had to have coconut shells. So Bill would make things out of nothing. So I hired Bill, and then he said, "Oh, I've got some wood at home, Roger, in the garage." So he brought that in, and we built that wooden tube around Kenny, and we worked out if we could stick his legs down through, hidden into the bottom of the 2-legged version, we could maybe get him to walk. We got so far on it. Then he said, "Look, I can't afford a top rod." So I went into the scrapyard next door, which were a lighting company, and I found a top from an old film light that was in the scrap heap thrown away, and it fitted beautifully. I measured it. And we tried, and Kenny couldn't move it. And we got his boots in, stapled those into the bottom of the legs. He still couldn't move it. And to make it look a bit better, because we had to show George at some point, I'd gone to an old place called Trading Post and got a handful of bits and pieces, and there were those the lighting, the the lights from, I think it was a Dakota. They were all junk stuff. I got some of those and we stuck those in. And then Bill couldn't make his little arms on the front, so he gave me a penknife and a bit of wood, and I carved it at home at night, and we stuck those on, and stuck a few things on him. And then in that pile of junk, I don't know why, I picked up a fighter pilot's harness from a jet, and Bill said, "Oh, I know what." So we stapled it inside, and Kenny could wear R2-D2, the wooden one, like a rucksack. So he supported the weight, and we got George down and Gary, and he took 3 steps. He fell over, but those 3 steps were probably the most auspicious moment on Star Wars, because without R2-D2, as you know, he's the storyteller. I mean, it pivots around him. We knew now we've got a movie.
Amazing. So it all hinged on R2, basically.
Yes. Yeah. And then at the same time, I thought, well, these weapons, you know, as I was saying, I knew I couldn't afford them. I couldn't draw them up, anything. So I went on my own. I didn't tell anyone. I went to the gun hire place, the owner I knew, because we rented all our weapons from him. And he set me up in there. And I got the Sterling, which I could have used a Sterling as it was. It's a science fiction weapon to me. Just beautiful. But I'd got my friend who was the buyer. He got me some T-strip, and I stuck those on. And then I dug around in the boxes there and found these beautiful sights from, some of them were from the army in Ireland, and boxes of unused stuff. And I stuck those on the top, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And I got a single fire clip instead of the big long clip, which you could do automatic firing, so we could do single shots. And then I just kept thinking, you know, George keeps saying Harrison Ford, yeah, his character's a space cowboy. And I dug around, and as soon as I saw the Mauser, I thought, wow, here it is. Here's a space cowboy's gun. You know, it had a wooden stock, and so I stuck some bits on the top of it, the more sights, and I then kind of nervously called John Barry and said, "You better bring George over, let him have a look at what I'm doing, because either I'll get fired or I'm on the right track." And so George came and was so happy just to see them. I mean, they were real weapons. They could fire. And then he stayed with me, and he got covered in super glue with me as well. We made Princess Leia's pistol together in there. So
oh, cool.
That set the whole tone for me for Star Wars. I never had to speak to George about any of it. I just got on with it because we had the same mindset.
Okay.
So that's how it all started, really.
When you're building Tatooine, like, what were the biggest challenges in building that?
Well, that was, you know, John Barry had designed the Little Prince, so he knew Tunisia, and he suggested George go and have a look, which he did, and it was very, very cheap. It was little used for international films. And it was only a short flight from London, and it was a trucking distance. You had to go through about 5 different countries, but you could truck from London. So, and what George liked that John had showed him was everything was there. All John did, like the exterior of the cantina, he built the cantina door and a wall onto it, and he made a couple of the domes out of plaster. They were taken down and they were stuck on the top, and it was a matter then of dressing everything, like the moisturizers. We took 2 or 3, and they were in Tozeur, and they were driven up to Matmata, which is a long drive up in where Luke's homestead was, and then a drive to Jerba across country, but we could move those around. So the biggest problem, funny enough, was the exterior for Mos Eisley and the exterior of the cantina. It looks perfect, you know, it's all dusty, broken down and everything. There was a beautiful olive tree, and it just ruined the whole Mos Eisley kind of, you know, it made it, oh, that's from Earth, that's not really there. So John designed a Boeing 747 scaled spaceship, crashed, and there were only a limited number of trucks. Everything John built, he was so clever. He designed all the sets that they could go in pieces. They were built inside other sets and everything. It was all packed. Unbelievable how they did it and taken down. So I'm, having been there for the whole wreckers and everything, I said, well, I got to take a load of scrap. And they thought, well, I was called Boy. We were so young, all of us. They said, well, Boy, why are you taking scrap? Don't be so stupid. It's got a truck through this. I said, I don't care. I'm taking it. So I got a load of scrap pieces of my aeroplane junk. And we'd found for the art department a machine that could press out almost like fiberglass, but like a polyurethane stamp, which is how we made C-3PO and the stormtroopers. And what it did was it printed out huge sheets that John built wooden structures for the Death Star, and then these were stapled on and stapled tight. They didn't move much, so you couldn't hit them and everything. I got a load of those, stuck them on the truck, got down there, and then I got up on a ladder and I got a staple gun they gave me, and I stapled all these chutes on to create like a crash spaceship hull. Started sticking all bits of engines and all of that on it, and I got a blowtorch and then started burning it all to make it look like crash metal, and it did the job. You know, these things are hardly noticed. They just walk past it going into the cantina, but something that I realized afterwards, it set a precedent in that almost every Star Wars movie since then has crashed spaceships in the landscapes.
Has to have it.
Yeah, and there was a lot of I mean, you know, it's endless, the problems of dealing with Tunisia. You know, before we started, there was a massive storm that flooded everything, and we had to rebuild everything. I just loved it. I loved that world. I loved being there, and so I was happy as anything. And I think, you know, we had to build the Sandcrawler, which was the biggest set that was built, and that was in Tozeur. It was almost on the border with Algeria.
And you had a problem with the Algerian army, right, or something like that happened. I remember. They
somehow wars had come up. They saw this thing. So under the border there is a lot of oil deposits. So the Algerians, and I went to the border, it was like a few kilometers, and there was just a barbed wire and a ditch. You could just walk into Algeria. It wasn't a problem. So they thought the Tunisians were building a machine to go and attack them to get hold of the oil deposits.
Oh, man.
And so this
just
huge,
like a Jawa.
Yeah, so an army faction all arrived, all these army trucks and everything, and their colonel majors, and they all came. And, you know, Robert Watts is fluent in French, fortunately, so he was communicating, and he finally managed to convince them. They had no idea what a film was or a movie was, nothing like that, but he convinced them by going behind it to see there was nothing there but scaffolding and wooden sticks holding up the whole set. So they went away feeling, okay, they're not coming to war with us.
So y'all had to switch gears and turn into Princess Leia and have a diplomatic solution to the
Right.
problem.
Exactly that. Yeah.
That's fun.
So Roger, how did you meet George Lucas? Sorry, Frank, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good.
I was John Barry and I were making this film called Lucky Lady in Mexico, and it was written by Gloria and Willard Hike, who wrote Graffiti. They worked on THX. They were students, friends with George, and they were writing some of the dialogue without credits for George. They're brilliant, the two of them. This was an amazing script. So with what happened was that there was no studio wanted to make a science fiction film, especially a children's fantasy. Alan Ladd, because Universal had taken on Spielberg to try to revive the box office, they all took on young directors. MGM took on Coppola, and Alan Ladd liked George and took him on, who came in with his worst nightmare, saying, I want to make this science fiction children's fantasy. And the studio, none of the execs wanted to do it. So Alan Ladd had them analyze what the box office would be. It came out at $12 million. That's what it would make. And they divide that by 3. And they told George, okay, if you can make your movie for $4 million, we'll go ahead. Well, Gary's budget was 8 in America, and there were no stages free. And looking around, Britain at that time was exactly half price of America. So $4 million was possible. And we had stages free and were begging for work so they could get cheap deals on them. So Gloria and Willard, and John and I become huge friends with them. They were just wonderful couple. They said, you've got to come down and look what they're doing, because what you're talking about, the spaghetti Western, they're building sets out of old Mexican buildings and stuff for this rum running adventure. And so I'm there. I was creating a salt factory, which is part of the action sequences, when George arrived and Gary, like familiar, like looking like students, like I was. And George came over and said that he wanted to make this science fiction film. And I was very honest. I told him, I'd never connected to a science fiction film, and I didn't understand why they were the way they were. They should be used and, old and dented. And he said, that's what I'm trying to do. That's when he told me I'm making a spaghetti Western. So that George picked up a shovel, actually, and was shoveling salt with me as we talked. That's typical of George. Wow. And I think we became friends on that moment. And then he stayed. We had dinner, George and Gary and myself and John Barry. Leslie wasn't there. Norman was working, I think. So that was it. I got hired and was told to be in London on August the 1st, ready to make this film. And George turned up, and that was the first time we read the script. And I as I said, I love mythology. I studied a lot. I knew all about. I knew when I read it what was under the surface, but it was just such a wonderful kind of adventure. And as I said before, it was this laser sword that was presented to Luke that I knew, okay, this will be the icon. If this thing can work, I had no idea how on earth we were going to do that. But I knew then that I thought, well, we've got something here, so I'm going to knuckle down and find a way to make this. And that's partly how I knew I couldn't dress any sets, and you have to remember there was nothing to reference. Like if I did a period film, I go and look at encyclopedias, I go to art galleries and look at paintings. There was nothing apart from really the unsung hero of Star Wars is Ralph McQuarrie. There were 6 paintings of his that there is Star Wars in those paintings. I mean, this man is brilliant. And I tried to give him due service in the documentary of how important he is to this whole the whole look and feel of Star Wars. And it really, I was driving around London and I think already I was quite different. I had a different attitude to everybody else because I had a Mustang. Which Yeah, and it was a big left-hand car. It was impossible in London. You couldn't overtake because I couldn't see unless I had a passenger with me. But I loved this car, and I remember driving around. And at that time, the Doors were my favorite band, so I was Doors were playing like crazy. And I thought, you know what? I use these bits of scrap for R2D2 and the guns. I know what, if I get crashed parts from aeroplanes and junk, I could layer those into the set. So I had to go and cross my fingers and go into George and Gary and John Barry again and said, I've got an idea. And to be honest with you, George is an independent filmmaker. He'd made THX. He went through what I was going through. And when I suggested this crazy idea, they said, sure, yeah, go and do it. And we moved to EMI when Fox would not trigger the film. That's why we had no money. So we developed the weapons. I developed R2D2. We worked out the size using, again, Bill Harmon. We had to work out how big the land speeder would be. And Bill had some wheelbarrows at home. And we took the wheels off and built it on wheels from that. And he had enough wood to us to build. We built 3 versions of it because it got smaller and smaller, because George's idea was shouldn't be a big 4-seater. It would be a little tiny broken down 2-seater sports car. And we put all this together, the wooden R2D2. I had found Chewbacca's bowcaster, which Ralph McQuarrie Ralph McQuarrie had actually got a blaster in him, and I found that, and I said, George, this would be much more suitable for this huge, tall, hairy Chewbacca. So we changed it for that. I found the Tusken Raiders, this old Totoka Warriors club, which I just loved the look of, and everything that I got, I changed 10 or 20%. So I stuck an old mace that they had in the end of it. All of this stuff, and this will show you, I don't say this out of any negativity, but it will show you how we got this film made. We turned up at EMI Studios the first week. They put a big table out with a white cloth on it, said, lay out everything you've done so far, Roger, and we'll get everybody down to have a look. So there they are, all laid out. They come down this whole lot, first ADs and the big prop people, and there was a whole crowd of them. The prop guy from the floor, I remember he picked up my Sterling submachine gun, my blaster for the stormtroopers, threw it at me literally and said, this is crap.
Wow.
Don't you understand? We're making a science fiction film for a big Hollywood director, and went off to get me fired.
What do you say to that?
Wow.
I have such a rebellious spirit that I just thought, you know what, this is how it's going to be from now on, but I'm sticking with George, and so is John Barry, and so we just got on with it. And you know, there were camps that the Gil Taylor, the director of photography, was awful, just an awful human being the whole way through. Wouldn't look at drawings, complained every set he couldn't light it, and was rude to George. And on the first morning of shooting, George was looking through the viewfinder, lining up a shot like he's an independent filmmaker, and he'd made American Graffiti. You know, he wasn't like a starter. And Gil Taylor marched over to him and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm lining up the shot. He said, that's my job. You go and handle the actors. I do all of that.
Wow.
And so Gary Kurtz, from then on, all of the communication was done through Gary Kurtz between them.
He was
I don't know what happened to him. This man, you know, he made the Beatles, one of the Beatles movies. He made Dr. Strangelove. He did Polanski's movies. He just, something turned him into a bitter old man, and he hated science fiction. And I think he was so resentful that he was having to work on this film that he took it out on everybody. I don't know. It was never explained.
He probably thought he was above everybody else. It's like, what am I doing here?
Yeah,
That's a credit to what happened with you guys in Star Wars, is right? These guys were all experienced people in the industry, so they had their way of doing things.
Exactly.
Brought something completely different, and you guys were doing your own thing.
Yes,
and that's why it came out the way it came out.
Well, it's interesting because I analyzed all of this, writing the book and afterwards and doing this documentary, and I realized that George's talent was everybody from ILM boys. They were surf bums. They just took on jobs to get paid and everything. And Richard Edlund was a photographer, and John Dykstra. They were both very clever, but they were surfers, really. George hired everybody who could do the job. We were all young, but we weren't jaded or ever went to him and said, no, Gov, that's not how you do it. This is how it's always worked.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, because George always said afterwards, he said, I know I wrote what couldn't be done on every film he ever wrote, but he said, I hired people, and I guess I knew they'd figure out how to do it. And I think that's, even with the posters, look at these first posters George hired. The guy had hardly ever done any before. Look at Ralph McQuarrie. He was drawing jet engines for Boeing. George had a very strong instinct for talent who could do what he didn't even know how to do or whether it could work.
It's funny that General Kodomi says that you say that you guys were rebel filmmakers. So you guys were the rebellion, and all of them were the empire.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember. See, I've been to art school, and I had hair down my shoulders and wore Cuban boots, and every weekend I was in art cinemas in London. I could watch every European movie. When I went into the art department, it was full of guys in suits and ties saying, get your haircut, shape up. You can't stop watching all these stupid movies from France and Italy. This is a job. I had a very different attitude to the whole thing, and I think that's what got me through somehow, and still does.
I'm going to take one from the chat here for Lewis, because I see Lewis has been asking a few questions. I've been missing it. He's asking if you have any props in your house and which one is your favorite.
The lightsaber is my favorite, I have to say. I just because it's the iconic image of Star Wars, there's no question, because everybody on the planet, doesn't matter what genre you are, what age you are, everybody wants a lightsaber.
Me and George were just talking about that before you came on. It's like, how do you wrap your head around that there's an object that the world recognizes?
Well, it flummoxed me. See, what I did with my buyer, I just said, listen, go and get me broken calculators, get me camera junk, and he came with me in a little plane, and we went around 4 airfields, and I could buy Rolls-Royce Derwent engines. They were just rotting in the rain. I bought, I don't know, 6 or 10 of them. I bought junk from airplane, everything you could imagine. I think I probably didn't spend more than £50 to get it all. Nobody wanted it. And so I got the idea, and he just came with crates of broken objects and everything. I never knew what it was for. I just would pick through and go, wow, that's interesting. Well, that'll be good. I didn't know what it was for until I focused my mind on which prop I had to put together. And I'd started with the guns, and George embraced it. So I knew that was it. I was doing that with the weapons and everything. And then the first major one I did was Luke's binoculars, because that was going to be right up front in shooting in Tunisia. I knew that we wanted it on the first day. And so I kind of did some rough sketches. It's the only ones I ever did, and thought, oh, okay, it's got to look like this. And then there was the UMIG part of a broken camera, and I found 3 other bits, and I got super glue, stuck them all together. And I thought, well, this works, but I need to let the audience know what it is. So I went to Brunnings, which is the camera hire store in London, where we got all our equipment. We could rent or buy it, and asked David French, the manager, for a couple of cheap lenses, which he gave me. And then I said, David, listen, I'm flummoxed. I've got to make this weapon that's like a sword in the future. Have you got anything here that might do? And I've interviewed him in the documentary, and he suggested a torch, and I said, no, the special effects boys made some torches, and that got rejected very quickly. They just looked so wrong. And he then just said, well, under the shelf there's a load of boxes. Go and have a look, see what's there. And it was literally the first box I pulled out, opened it up. There was tissue paper. There were 3 Graflex handles, the battery tube on the side. And honestly, it's like, this was my moment. I hit my holy grail. They're so beautiful object. You don't know what they are for. Yeah. So they looked right, and they had a nice red button on it and everything. And I just took all 3, raced back to the studio. I thought, okay, I got to stick some bits around. And this is one of the questions that had come up. I looked at it, and I got some T-strip left over from the Stormtroopers barrel. And I first thought, okay, I can get 6 perfectly around there. And that worked. And this is part of the whole thing with Star Wars. Nothing was ever, I never measured anything out. I never drew it. I never got anything planned out carefully. I just started sticking my strips around, and I got 7 on, which is the one. So when I did the Origin Saber one, they said, can you do the very origin before it became that lightsaber? And that was the one where it would have had 6. And so I held it and thought, wow. And I'd broken down a calculator, the Texas Instrument one, because I broke everything down. I had a screwdriver and pliers. I didn't have much, but and I'd found the bubble strip inside, and I thought, well, that'll fit into the clip, because I didn't like the clip being exposed. And literally, it was another phone call over to the office, and told them, I said, can you get George to come here? I think I found the lightsaber. And George came over and just held it and smiled at me. And it was heavy and everything. And in fact, part of the forward in the book you'll read, he says, I still remember the day that when I went into the office and Roger showed me an old piece of a camera equipment and showed me a lightsaber. And he said that's how he was doing things. And he said, but not only that, that's probably one of 15 things like that he did that day.
Wow.
And there it was. So the blade itself, which everyone was talking about, and I had my office was full of junk, and I had because you can imagine the strain of what I had to pull off in that time. So I had a little tiny fridge. I had a kettle, some tea bags, and some milk, and I could make tea in the office, save time. And the art department, there were about 6, the construction manager, the prop master, the John, Barry, the art department, the few heads, they would all come to my office at 7 in the morning to get cups of tea, because the cantina wasn't open. And we were all standing there talking, and then the blade came up, and I said, well, John, I used to do installations for art gallery stuff, and we painted front projection paint, and it glowed a bit. And they said, oh, great, do it. So there was a meeting called with the special effects. We all turned up. John Steers was there, and Gil Taylor came. And when the idea came up, he said, oh, I'm not having that on the set. You're going to ruin my lighting. And I looked at George, and George just looked and said, do it. Wow. So
love that.
End of discussion.
Yeah, I mean, this was my daily kind of like, oh God. So John Steers, he drilled out, I made 3 lightsaber handles out of my 3 Graflex. I quickly made them up. One of them that I gave to them, he drilled it out, stuck a little motor in there, and it set slightly off center, and they got wooden dowel and painted it. And so when it revolved in the motor, it actually shimmered a little bit, and it worked. You can see it even on these on the outtakes or the rehearsals you can see on YouTube. It actually worked enough for the George's ILM, the beginnings of ILM. There was rotoscoping in those days, whereby you could paint each frame of the film, and so he painted it up. But there it was, you know. And there's a lot of there's some fans have always said, mine wasn't the true original, and there was only one ever made, and all this stuff. I've had people kind of have arguments with them, because I always say, well, I did make them, I know what I'm doing. So we interviewed David French on purpose, and David said, well, I had somebody ask him, it was COVID when I interviewed him, so I couldn't go, but I had the director and producer of the Galaxy Britain built interview him. And he said, well, what happened then, David? And he said, well, they called me and said, do you have any more of these Graflex handles? And David rented these cameras, for movies, because they're the big press camera from the 40s and 50s. Yeah. That's what they all used, because they worked. They were beautiful camera. He said, well, how many do you want? And they said, well, how many can we have? So he said, well, I can give you 30. So 33 Graflex handles came to us in EMI Studios. And then afterwards, I just had David, I said, how much did you get paid for those, David? And he said, £850 I charged them. And then afterwards to me, he said, you know, you've completely ruined my business. I can't replace them. I can't get any anymore. They're thousands of dollars, because all of these fans want them.
Yeah, the price of those skyrocketed.
Yeah.
How is it that you feel? I mean, you've created, or you did a lot of input to create the main lightsaber. I'm pretty sure you had a hand in Obi-Wan's and Vader's.
Yes.
But there's been so many different iterations. Every Jedi has one. It's styline's different. Which is your favorite outside of the ones that you have touched?
Well, what I think, here's the thing, you know, I took such care. And so when I knew what I felt Luke should look like, and there it was, Obi-Wan Kenobi's, I thought, you know, this is Merlin or Gandalf. Yes. You know, he needs to be an old desert mystic. So we got together, and they broke down my jet engines. I taught the props how to break everything down into components that we could use. And that part of the junk that came in was this rifle grenade. That was a grenade with a stick on the end of it. Yeah. So that we thought, well, there it is. Stuck a bit of a Rolls-Royce jet engine, a bit of my Graflex, and then I don't know why, but I had some taps and a faucet head just happened to fit on the end, and it looked right. And then I thought, well, Darth Vader, you know, he's part of the cold empire. He needs to have something that's the opposite. So I worked with the special effects boys, because I thought they could handle that way. And we found the MPP, which is what it looked like. And so each one had serious kind of everything I did. I took a great deal of time imagining the future, the past, what they should be like, everything. Because I loved it. This is a world that I was, you know, wanted to be in. And I think overall, the first time I have to say I went, oh wow, that's good, was Ren's, the one with the two blades and the blade and the guards on it. When I saw that in the forest, I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, that's another. It's so fitting for him. It's funny, this question you asked, because with Theory Savers, then Nia immediately said to me, can we please do another one? What would you like to do? And I said, well, to be honest with you, I directed second unit on Return of the Jedi. And when I was there, I realized that they slightly changed Darth Vader's, and it just didn't look what Darth Vader should hold. And then I found out they'd lost all of the lightsabers, had gone missing from Empire Strikes Back. So the set deck, and I don't like disparaging people, but he should never have been doing. He did Empire. He was better at doing period films. He had no inclination to science fiction. In fact, I've never forgiven him because he's the one who stuck rivets in my T-strip handles and that one unfortunately went through the whole of Star Wars. And to me, rivets made it look human made. It had to be mystical. And they changed. He didn't even bother to do the bubble strip. They could have easily reproduced that. He just stuck a bit of an old computer board on it, an early iteration of it. So I afterwards, the one regret I had, that if I had still been doing that job, I would have created, when, you know, seeing Darth Vader walk in on that first set, that image of this iconic black kind of figure coming in there, I think he deserves a lightsaber that justifies that look. So that's what I said to Nia. So I designed one, and I used Ralph McQuarrie. The only illustration that's ever existed is the Ralph McQuarrie has a picture of Darth Vader fighting with a lightsaber in a corridor. You can't see it. You could just see the end. So I took just those two ends. So it's got a history to it that connects. And that we're getting it. It's all been designed, and they're working out immense electronics. They're so clever who do it, because it's kind of gunmetal black, like an old weapon, and it's got veins of red underneath glass down the side, because that's where I imagine if he's holding it, that's where the force is bleeding through. So that we're getting on the 22nd, 23rd, and then Nia will put that one out. I think he wants to do pre-sale, and he said it's Darth Vader's. You're going to have to make a lot of these. So that's will be my favorite, I think. So I'm rewriting the history, and then he asked me, he wants to do one for Christmas. So I said, well, I'm going to do the origin saber, the one that's coming is called the Father, because Vader is German for father, and Hindu is father, so it's called the Father. I have to still be careful with Disney. I can do whatever I want with Lucasfilm. I'm regarded as family, and George knows I've supported them. I never do anything derogatory and everything. Disney are fine with me, but I can't go out and say I'm making Star Wars, and so I'm very careful with how I do things. But I always, you know, and if you look at the history, the canon, everything, there is no anywhere story of the origins of all of this. Where did that very first lightsaber come from? The Jedi. So I've written a whole story with that, and this will be the next book. I think it's called The Origin of My Lightsaber, and I go into all of that, what I imagine where it can come from, and it's all based on I was very lucky to go. We were going to do a movie. A producer took me out to the Shaolin Monastery in China, and I spent a week there with the monks, the fighting monks. Oof. Unbelievable. I've never seen warriors like this. So I kind of got an education into how I thought all this would be. So I'm continuing. You know, I just, to me, this world, I love it so much, and that's what I love about Nia with Theory Savers. He cares so much. He's so knowledgeable about all of it, and he puts everything back. You know, we're all waiting for Vader 2, which he's invested $1 million of his own money to get this made how he wanted it, and I love him for that. And he's so kind of respectful of George, so that's why we kind of link together, really. So those are the weapons. So I think, you know, I'm very fond of the gaffy stick, looking at the weapons, but you know, the original lightsaber is still my favorite. I mean, I just hold it, and I've got a copy of my original that Graflex company made, which I take around, and I'll have it at Rebel Scum. And I've had people crying when they're holding it, and people, you know, and I'm very respectful to the fans, because I don't think I've ever met one who says Star Wars didn't change my life. And this is this is to be respected. You know, it's given people, as I said at the beginning, something to believe in, and I'm the one now who's the kind of gatekeeper has to do it. So I'm more than happy to continue this legacy.
Well, you did. So not just through Star Wars, and I was just talking to George about this beforehand. And so I found something out that I have to take back to my mom that she thought I was crazy, and I knew I was right. So a lot of people don't know that. So that poster right behind you, Black Angel.
Yes.
I lived in Germany from 1980 or 79 through 83.
Oh,
And
did
we went
you?
to England and I saw Empire Strikes Back there. So I saw the movie.
Oh,
and
you
I
did?
remember it. And so I was very, very much into fantasy. And that was the first fantasy movie I ever saw on screen. And so now you look at, I'm pretty sure that heavily influenced Excalibur. And because you can see a lot of the similarity between that and Excalibur. And
well, I don't know if you knew, but no, I mean, we made this with a grant from the government of £25,000. George chose my script because they needed a short that connected with Star Wars. And I made it with a crew of 11 in Scotland because I love Scotland, and I created what I thought was a kind of ancient myth. And I got a call. I knew John Borman. I always really respected him as a filmmaker. And he asked Roger Pratt, the DP, and I to go down to Shepperton Studios. And he had his entire crew in the theater, and he got a print of Black Angel. And he said, I'm going to show it to the crew with you here because that's what I want. He said, I said, John, and Roger Pratt by now, I think he was out the back throwing up. He was so nervous about this whole thing because there was this kind of, proper real film with a big crew and money and everything. And I said, John, I had a Volkswagen van with everything in it. We had one camera. I had a DP who never DP'd a film ever in his life, but I knew he had a massive talent. And I said, I made this up as we went along. And I had sometimes short ends of, they gave me the finished film when they finished a roll of film on Empire, whatever's left over, they're called short ends. They gave me all of those. I had all these bits of film. And sometimes I could measure out on a location and just do one shot and move on and stuff. So I said, John, you're going to have a huge crew. They want catering and toilets and all of this stuff. You're never going to get where I did. But he said, I don't care. This is what I want. And do you mind? He said, I loved your underwater. I shot in a swimming pool. They kept open for us with an Ariflex and Roger Pratt and I standing in a swimming pool. He said, I would like to include an underwater sequence, which, if you don't mind, I said, John, I'm honored, honestly. So, yeah, it was, there was a kind of common ground there between Borman. And then George, I had to make 25 minutes. I didn't have enough to make up the 25 minutes of film when we cut it together. And my editor and my fights, obviously, I didn't have a choreographer and I had a limited amount of time. And I got it all done. And Alan Strawn, the editor, said, listen, there's a thing called step printing, and you could repeat the negative up to 6 times and slow it down that way. So he showed me, and I think we did 4 or 5, and I made up the time for 25 minutes so I could fulfill my contract. But then George saw that and liked it so much, he then went back and slowed down the Yoda fight in Empire. That's where that came from.
In the tree.
Yeah. So, it's had another history. I mean, it just, the negative got lost. My print got thrown out. George's got lost on the ranch. Nobody knew where it was. And I kept being asked for people who wanted to see it again. And I thought, you know what, it's so old now that maybe it's better hidden. But I got a call one day from Universal Studios asking my name, which company did I make this film Black Angel through? And I told him my company. And he said, I've got your negative here.
What?
Nice.
And at the same time, he said, you don't have to collect it now. I've got it safe. and they'd done an article on Black Angel in Wired magazine because they said it had such an influence on Highlander. I mean, a lot of movies.
Right.
Yep.
And so I got a call from San Francisco from a company that were restoring. They did some of Star Wars, and they said, we want to restore your film for you.
Awesome.
So I said, well, that would be amazing. I can't afford it right now. You know, when I get another movie, then maybe we could back it on. And they said, no, it's a gift. We've realized we want to do it for you. So they restored it for me. And it got shown once in Mill Valley. That's the only time it was shown in America. And it caused a huge stir. It got written up in the LA Times everywhere. And then it got screened at the Glasgow Film Festival because Glasgow feel they own me because I kind of introduced Scotland, that mystical beauty, to the world. And the one screening was started as a 100-seater, went up to 400, and it went viral on the internet after it. So I'm now still in pre-production on the feature version of it. It's taken years to put together, but
That was my
I'm
next
determined.
question.
Yeah, I'm determined to make it as an independent movie, and I'm not giving in on that. So everything is done. I've got cast, everything, and we're just waiting now for the final money to come in, and then I can go and make it.
That's awesome. And
Yeah, it
then
is.
you turned down Conan to work on that movie, right?
I did. And,
You were supposed to be the set designer for Conan the Barbarian.
Because I'd done Star Wars, Alien, Life of Brian, I thought, okay, I've got to turn now. I've got to start making movies. So I managed to get signed up into the National Film School and went there so I could just do lighting and editing and working with actors, all sorts of bits and pieces. And I wrote Black Angel while I was there. And I was broke. I remember being at home. It was my wife was working at a health food store and she would get free food we were eating, I remember. And the phone kept ringing and it was Universal saying, please, we want you to do this film. And I kept saying, I can't. I've got to stick to my guns because I'd seen other people try to do this and switch over. And I thought, if I go back, and believe me, if there's a film I really wanted to do was Conan. And it was John Milius. And it was, I kept saying no. And of course, they were offering me more and more money every time they rang back.
Oh, man.
And I said, I got to stick to my guns. I've got to do this. I've got to get this short film made. So, that was a telling moment for me.
That's awesome.
Roger, where did you start in the industry? Like in your first film, were you, whatever it was?
There is something called destiny. And I look at my life and how it's gone, and I have similar moments to Luke Skywalker. I have to say, it's very strange. I hated school. I got out of school without telling my father and got into an art school in Reading, where I lived, and where I took the rest of my school exams, because instead of being hit and treated horribly by these torturing, I don't know why they were teachers then. I think it was to take out their aggressions on children. And being treated like an adult for a year, I got, I was supposed to have 8 O levels. I got 2 at school. I got 6 in 1 year in art school. And while I was working there to earn money, I used to work putting up huge marquees for showgrounds. They were all over the south of England, and where we lived, that the company did them. They employed students every summer, and it was it was a job from 7 in the morning till 10 at night, 7 days a week, and we would earn a lot of money. And one day, we were putting up this tent in a park outside of London, and I saw this prison camp. So being inquisitive, I went over there. I took a break, went over there and asked what they were doing. And they said, "Oh, we're building a film set." And I said, "Really? It looks so real." And they said, yeah, we know. There's an old homeless man comes by every day, gives us food. He thinks we're prisoners. So I said, "What is this for?" And they said, "It's for Pinewood Studios. It's a movie they're making." And I went, "Oh, what is that?" So my mate and I from art school, we took the break at lunchtime. Instead of eating, we went through the trees, couldn't get into Pinewood Studios. We found a hole in the fence and we dug out under and got in under.
Wow.
And I don't know why, but I think it was the first James Bond they were filming, and the stage doors were open. They weren't closed. And I could see the lights and this action and the smell. Just something like hit me, like, I got to do this. And then I went into this huge storeroom. There was no one there, and there were gold bars. And then I picked them up and said, "These are fake. They look so real. Wow, I got to do this."
Wow.
And I wrote letters to everybody, every studio. I got one letter back from a producer who said, "Listen, you've studied at art school. You've got your diploma. You should try to go into the art department. That'll be the easy way in for you. But I warn you, you'll need architecture." I was so desperate. I applied to Oxford School of Architecture, got in, accepted.
Wow.
I needed 2 A-levels, the major exams, and I did I got an A-level economics by doing it by post in a few months, and 2 years there. And then I got to know very well the principal, and he said, "Roger, I'm going to give you your diploma now. I think you should go and do what you really want, because you're going to be bored stiff. The next 2 years are all going to be concrete mixes." So I did. I went off. I got a job in London unpacking dresses in some huge department store, writing letters. And finally, I got an interview with a man called Charlie Bishop, who was doing a TV series called Department S. And I went there with my folder of all my stuff, and he looked at it and said, "Look, I would take you on in a heartbeat, but I'm finishing the series. I've made you an appointment down at Shepperton Studios. So can you go there on Thursday?" And I said, "Of course." Now, part of this story is, while I was at art school, my mate, David, for some reason, he bought for, I think, 7 shillings and sixpence, which is nothing. He bought this Mark 7 Jag, huge old thing that was beautiful. We drove with our 2 girlfriends up into London to go to the cinema for the first time in the big London cinema. We watched Dr. Zhivago, and it blew me away. And I had an out-of-body experience when I was a child. I had another one with the music and this film. It affected me so much.
Right.
I turn up at Shepperton to meet John Box, who designed Dr. Zhivago.
Wow.
And he opened my folder, looked at it all, and said, "Well, I'll take you on." He said, "Are you willing to make the tea?" And I said, I don't care, whatever. So I got the job as tea boy. And John closed up my folder and he said, "Let me tell you about the film industry. Okay, you're standing in the desert, you've got a bottle of green ink in your pocket, and there's an aeroplane next to you, and then there's a cloud of dust. The producer and director arrive and they go, 'Wow, this is great. Can you have it read by tomorrow morning?'" And he said, "You either do it or you talk your way out of it with an alternative on the spot." And that kind of was the wisest advice I think I ever had. I met John way later in life, and I reminded of this. He said, "Oh, it was very prophetic. I can't remember saying that, but how true that is." And that was Oliver.
Wow.
And Oliver,
It was a great movie.
it's beautiful. Well, when you look at the old kind of canals in London and everything, what John Box did, I think I learned everything that I ever used on Alien, Star Wars from John, from that movie. And he was the most simple human being. He was wonderful, and he supported me, because that's when I walked into a room full of ties and suits.
Yeah.
And being told to get a haircut. I wasn't allowed out of the office. I wanted to see the canals. I would sneak out and go and look, and they'd catch me and send me back and say, "If you do it again, you're fired." I didn't care, you know, I wanted to learn by how can you do it? And so I got to know the set decorators, and they really took me under their wing, showed me what they were doing. And that was how really it all started.
That's crazy. And I know in Dr. Zhivago, Sir Alec Guinness was in that film as well.
Yeah.
He was in that film. And I found out then Charlie Bishop offered me to work on Randall and Hopkirk, deceased. And then I found out that Charlie was the art director in charge of the entire Ice Palace sequence.
Wow.
So you can imagine I'm pressing him with questions. How did you do it? And it was all done with candle wax. Wow. Weeks and weeks of building up candle wax, and all of those, because it went from spring to winter and everything, all of those daffodils and everything, they planted by hand, and fake ones, and all the leaves blowing off the trees in the graveyard sequence, they sewed those on by hand.
Wow.
They were, yeah, that was a different era of filmmaking with David Lean, but you know, these were just wonderful teachers for me. I just was absorbing all of their knowledge and experience.
Yeah, we have somebody in the chat, Lewis. He had actually asked, with all the advances in technology such as 3D printing, would you do what you did the same way again, or would you take advantage of these technologies that are currently present, like 3D printing?
I would use whatever I could, but I do think there's something about, you know, models are still extensively used, and I'm always looking forwards. I was one of the ones when I was directing Second Unit on Phantom Menace. Towards the end, I was one of probably only 3 people encouraging George to go digital with the cameras, because I said it's going to save us. You know, you're directing a movie, and the producers behind you saying you've done 4 takes. You know, do you know how much film costs? Yeah. And I knew it would be the best revolution yet. And everybody, even ILM, were going, "No, George, you can't do it. We've got to stick with film." So but I do think there's things happen. There's an organic reason that when you look at the first Star Wars and even Alien, I mean, it was all put together with a lot of scrap and junk and stuff, but I think it bleeds through for an audience. There's something, it is organic, that's the word, that suits it. And it would make, you know, I know, like making for the Black Angel feature film, the costume designer who's in Hungary, and I have a very wonderful artist who actually 3D printed some rings for the lead character and stuff, and then she aged them down and made them look beautiful. And wow. I realized there is, you know, you use whatever you can. It's very interesting. I was asked to go to Hong Kong a couple of years back for a huge conference, and a distributor asked if I'd come, and it was on AI and internet, and I was asked to give a lecture, and I think they all thought I'm going to come and say, "Oh, it's going to be the end of film industry," you know. And so I got up and I said, "Listen, I remember when first what are they called, tape came in and everyone said, oh, it's the end of the film industry now, and it wasn't the end of it. And then when DVDs came in, it was the end of the film industry, and then when Blu-rays came in, it's the end of the film industry. And I said, when you look at AI, I will give an example. George Lucas, when he wrote Star Wars, took the plot of the entire film from Forbidden Fortress, you know, which is 2 squabbling peasants who get caught up in a war they're nothing to do with, and one's short, one's tall, and they get kidnapped, taken prisoner, they get let out in a desert, they have a squabble and separate, and they come together because a princess needs them to help fight the evil empire who's trying to take over her kingdom. Yep. It's Star Wars. And I said, to do the trench run, George borrowed from Dam Busters, where the Barnes Wallis, this crazy designer in England, invented a bouncing bomb, and it changed the course of history. And when you look at all of the things that George, he used elements and put them together into something that, you know, he used Errol Flynn's kind of, and Douglas Fairbanks swashbuckling, you know, sword fights to create the sword battles. So I said, it's no difference to if AI can be a tool that you can use, depending on your creativity of how you ask it to do what you want, and then you take it and then you create into it.
Yes.
Then these things can work for us. So you have to look at things in that way, I think. But I still love, you know, I realized something the other day, and it struck me out of nowhere that one of the legacies of what we did, or I did on that first Star Wars, was taking bits and pieces and gluing them together and making all the props. Well, look what's happened in the world now. There's so many fans don't go to the toy shop and buy the model of this and buy that. They're searching out, and they know what I did because they've researched. I didn't know what I'd used, the components. And when I wrote the book, I was able to research from the fans, say, oh, I used one of those. Oh, okay. Oh, that's what it was. And cool. It's think about all of these people. They're doing things that they probably never even imagined they had an aptitude for, and they're making things like what we did and duplicated and replicated. I think that's wonderful, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah, to keep that art alive. I mean, it's art. It is art.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's what inspired me building this backdrop here. I built this.
Yeah.
But, a lot of that is found parts. You know, like I got a fog light in there, and I used plastic parts and then parts from like tanks and glued it all together, making the pipes. Copper on one side and just finding things, but a lot of it was inspiration from what you did, and I didn't even realize that. I just was just like, this is what I saw in Star Wars, and I thought this would work, you know.
Yeah, and it works, you know, and it's wonderful. I think that you're not going to a shop and just buying it. You're expressing a creative, maybe you don't know you had.
Yeah, even Flex, who's the quietest of all of us.
Yes.
But he will get the ship that's actually on sale, and he will wash it. He'll put a wash on it. It will look 100 times better than what he picked up at the store.
Right.
It just looks so much better, and I'm blown away by the stuff that he does. And he's like, I just take the time, and it's almost therapeutic for him. He has shared it's just a time for him to just veg out and look at the piece and take out the patina that he can see in it that I can't see in it, because I'm just getting the one at the shelf and I'm putting up on my wall. And he's like, no, it doesn't look like in universe. It has to be aged. And I envy his talent, but it's stuff like that he's pulled from stuff like that you've done, that you've made us a used universe, because it kind of does make sense that the future isn't pristine.
Exactly.
The future is used, you know.
Well, you know, I had the advantage. I went on a submarine before I did Star Wars, and you just wonder how these things work. But it's crammed with switches and pipes and dripping water and stuff. And then when you look at the astronauts who went up in these capsules where there isn't an inch of space, there's just everything, because it's not going to be like Star Trek where you're sitting in armchairs and it's all so comfortable. You can't. The cost that's involved, if you look at it, and the weight and distribution and everything's going to be crammed and used. So that was my philosophy, like with everything for Tatooine. You know, when I found in the junk piles, I found these containers, the metal ones, where they used to have in airliners that they heat the food. If you look in detail, they're all over Tatooine because I realized, you know, that would be how these components would be done. And in fact, John Barry, when he designed the Aunt Beru's kitchen, it's actually exactly the shape of an airliner hold.
Yes.
And so he thought then that's how this would be holding up weight distribution, but also it will be all taken up in components, and it's probably reused from something else. So I think that's why it felt so authentic, why people believed it for the first time, really, a science fiction movie.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and even the contrast between the Empire and the rest of
Yes.
the universe, how it was so sleek and clean and cold
Yeah.
versus everything else that was lived in. And even when Lucas went back into the Phantom Menace and we saw things pristine, and then we're like, oh, that's why. Because when the Empire came and Palpatine did what he did, nobody could get anything new. So that's why they had to use everything all over again 100 times over. That's
Yes.
why the Falcon had so many used parts on it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. That's my favorite set, the hold on the
on the
Falcon.
Falcon.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
And
Mr.
you know, this was the crossing my fingers, because I promised everyone I could make these sets out of old junk and rain pipes and all sorts of stuff. And we found a telephone exchange, the old type, being pulled down, and we bought the whole interior of it for nothing. And I was getting my prop boys for weeks and weeks layering this stuff. It looked terrible. I was just hoping no one would come on and look. But when it finally, the layers worked, and then I got in and put some old polish and made it look aged, and then we put drips in it and put some letraset on all of the stuff and made it look real. I knew when I watched people coming onto that set, they were eyes wide open. They were looking at this. Wow, how did you get a ship? How did you get a part of a ship to shoot in?
Yeah.
And I knew then we were onto something.
Yeah, it's the best to us. I know there's a lot of us in here who are OT fans, diehard OT fans, that the Falcon
Saw all
is
the movies
it.
in the theater.
Yeah, we saw all the movies in the theater, and the Falcon is it. The Falcon
Yes.
is, you know, the if you can have that one ship, it's the Falcon. That's it.
Yes.
That's all we want.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
I agree.
Whether it's the cockpit, whether it's the hold, whether it's like the hyperdrive isn't freaking working, that's still the ship I want. That's still the one I want.
So
You know?
Yeah.
the Falcon, when Ralph McQuarrie originally drew it, was a different design, and they ended up getting changed to the design that it had. Did you guys did the model come before the set, or did
Yes.
it did?
No, it was all the wrong way around. There was no communication. We had a pouch that would be flown to us on a Thursday with photographs.
Wow.
What happened was that is what Ralph McQuarrie drew, and Joe Johnston built it. And when George got off the flight from London and went and saw it, he said, "But that's the Eagle from Space 1999."
Yes.
And it was. So, you know, from what I know, as urban legend has it, that George just said, make it like a hamburger, because he was thinking about he'd had a hamburger on the way over, and make it like a hamburger. So Joe Johnston did, but he loved the cockpit and he'd spent a lot of time making it. So he thought, oh, well, I'll just stick it on the side. So again, this thing was born out of kind of sheer, I don't know, intuition and how do I make this work?
But as fans, we cannot imagine a center cockpit Falcon.
No,
We don't want
I agree.
it has to be on the side.
I agree. I love it. I got a model here of it, and it's you know, it's like exactly Han Solo. It's a ship that's a piece of junk with a heart of gold, and you're just rooting for it all the time.
Yeah.
It's one of those rare instances too where like it is a character.
Yes,
it is
is
a character in the Star Wars movies. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody, when it comes on, it's got its own theme. I mean, it's got its own music. It comes on, you want to see it, and that's what happens with the sequels, right? Whenever it pops back up, we were just happy to see it again.
Oh
yeah, absolutely.
Even with the Solo film, just the expansion of the lore of how he got the ship, and even how the robots integration had to get in there, which tied into some line in Empire and so forth. But it's like this ship has gone through hell, you know.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I think that, you know, that was again, it was an influence to me when I read the first script, because he does say it in there. This is a pile of junk. Luke says it, and so I knew this is what I've got to do. I've got to make this film work in that way, and to make it all like that. And when the first set we ever did was the cockpit, actually, and John Barry had hired Harry Lang, who was on 2001, and Harry was doing it beautifully, like these beautiful switch panels, and it was all done like that. And we were down like this young kid, going, you know, Harry, I'm going to mess this up. And he'd look at me thinking, who is this kid? What? And he finally said, well, it's yours. And I immediately took his seats out, put in a couple of old fighter pilot seats, and stuck in what I did to it and showed George, and that was it. You know, there it was. It had that right look. I interviewed his son when I did the documentary, because Harry had died. His son said, well, you really did influence Harry. He said, because when I was a kid, he said, I think 16 or 17, I used to work on Star Wars. And he said that Harry had me, his dad, he said, had me with a wheelbarrow down at a junkyard in England.
Red 5. I know what you mean.
So he was with a wheelbarrow getting.
Watch that crossfire, boys.
Oh, hey, we got some sound.
Background sound.
So he was with a wheelbarrow with Harry going around a junkyard in London, picking up bits of scrap and stuff. And he said I had to wheel it back in the wheelbarrow, and then we took it in the car to the studios. So obviously Harry had taken on what I was saying.
Crazy.
Yeah. I think I got to go.
You got to get going?
Well, I got a kid who's got to get to bed.
Okay.
And a dog that needs to be fed. Stuff. I just realized it's 9:30.
Yeah, it gets a little late real quick.
It does.
It goes by fast.
Yeah.
Get the book, guys. Cinema Alchemist.
Yes, for sure.
And
the wretched publishers don't do anything. I mean, nothing. They do no publicity. They just wait for people to find it and buy it. So that's why I'm going out now to any of the events I can. I'm off on Thursday morning early to Mexico to Jedi Con, and then Rebel Scum, and then another one here. So, you know, I just realized I got to get out and start doing all of this stuff and get it known now, especially in America. And people like it, the book. I mean, it's written more of a mentorship for everyone to kind of believe in themselves and to show that we got this made with no money and no support, nothing, and we got it done, and it influenced the world. So, you know, whatever you do in life, just believe in yourself and get on and do it. And this was my main kind of motivation behind it. And I thought it's got to be known, you know, it's got to be told, because it would be a shame if all of this story is gone, because if I don't tell it, it's not going to be known. David West Reynolds, who wrote one of the forwards in the new book, he was the head of literature for 10 years at Lucasfilm. He's the one who inspired me to write it, because he said, I went through every archive and I kept, you know, I did the Star Wars dictionary, and I'm going, but this lightsaber, where did it come from? Who made it? Who made this? Who made this? Weapons, everything that he was detailing, he could find no reference anywhere. My name or John Barry's were never mentioned anywhere. So I thought, you know what, I think we have to, you know, for posterity and history, it should be told, really.
And we want to know that as fans. I mean, as soon as we fell in love with this film, we're pulling back the veil. We want to know more behind the magic.
Yes.
Knowing that, you know, it's great for us. I'm looking forward to the movie or whatever you're going to have streaming, hopefully in the future, so we can see that documentary.
Yes,
because I think the fans would love that, and hearing it from your own point of view, because you were there. None of us were there, and we just want to know behind the magic.
Yeah, and it has a lot. Guillermo del Toro wanted to be in it because he was influenced by so much by Star Wars. He became a director, so he's interviewed throughout it with me. And I chose Gareth Edwards because I loved Rogue One. So Gareth gives a huge contribution to the movie, and kind of the sections come from what Gareth is saying. And I couldn't get clips of the film, and they didn't represent what I was talking about. So they had a company who could do very high-end animation. So I invented scenes that would illustrate. You know, I've got the Sandcrawler picking up my robot that was a Chris Foss inspired robot in the lineup, picking that up in the desert and explaining how that works. And I've got all sorts of samurai, a different samurai sword fight to show the influence, Excalibur rising out of the lake. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff in there that's of interest.
Awesome.
So it's 2 hours 20 minutes, the one I've done now. It's a fan special. There's a lot in it. So and I managed to get John Rinsler before he died. I owe a lot to John, and so he gives a little talk. Robert Watts, who was the production controller, who was one of the few with us, with John and I, he was interviewed. And Bill Harmon, the carpenter who made the original wooden R2-D2, has become the star of the documentary. He's so funny. He's in there, even with a little toolbox where he made everything in the beginning of Star Wars. He's got it with the little the triangle sticker on it. He's telling about his story. I got David French where I found the lightsaber handle. I mean, all of these people are in there. So there's a lot of people who no one ever knew about, but they're all part of the story, you know?
The magic, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll get it out eventually. There's a few blocks on the way, but I'll get it done.
Looking forward to it.
Roger, thank you so much for sharing your stories
Not
with
at
us.
all.
And I look forward to meeting you at Rebel Scum Con. All of us do. Maybe we can hear more stories when we see you in person.
This is I could go on for hours, but I've got duties now.
All right, we got people buying your book already.
It's on Amazon. It's not that expensive, and if anyone brings it, I signed it, of course. Whatever you want. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Good to meet you guys.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it. You have a great
Have a
evening.
good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody in the chat, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. There will not be a show on Thursday, but we'll be back in 2 weeks because next week I'll be in San Diego Comic-Con, and we'll have another show before Rebel Scum Con to get it going. So hope you guys have a great week. And until next time, may the force be with you.
May the force be with you. Absolutely. Bye.
Always.